The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Network, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by the Package Tourist in the magical mystery tour called Life, Matthew DiBiase, who tonight will be offering his personal analysis of last week's Democratic presidential debate.
Thank you, Ralph. Tonight, I will be discussing the Democratic presidential debate that took place last Wednesday, November 20th. The debate featured the usual cast of characters: Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, Tulsi Gabbard, Cory Booker, Tom Steyer, and Andrew Yang. Tulsi Gabbard won the award for being the most irrational candidate on the stage. It's become painfully obvious that sometime after the second Democratic debate, she has entered into the pay of the GOP and has become an agent provocateur for Steve Bannon, to whom Kamala Harris tied Gabbard to during the debate. During the first two Democratic debates, Gabbard behaved like a conventional Democratic candidate, but after not appearing in the third debate and starting with her performance during the fourth debate, she has espoused Trump-like conspiracy theories, advocated isolationist policies, and has acted like a gadfly trying to track Democratic frontrunners like Elizabeth Warren in the fourth debate and Pete Buttigieg in last week's debate with zowie-owie questions. For the record, Buttigieg deftly handled and skillfully turned the tables on Gabbard when she mysteriously tried to zing him about using U.S. troops to fight the drug cartels in Mexico. For the most part, Gabbard was rambling, filibustering, isolationist on foreign policy, platitudinous when answering questions on climate change, but offering no solid specifics for dealing with the problem. The question I have about Gabbard is, who is padding her poll numbers to make sure she is part of the debate stage? And who is funding her campaign because she does not sound or act or talk like a true Democrat or even a true revolutionary like Bernie Sanders? Tulsi Gabbard acts like an android programmed or brainwashed to cause as much trouble as possible for the Democratic campaign in order to benefit Donald Trump. I can imagine even more trouble coming from her in the future. Cory Booker has gotten lost in the shuffle of the Democratic campaign. His fundraising has dropped, and one wonders how much longer he can continue. In fact, he may have been trying to earn a spot in the Democratic sweepstakes because midway through last week's debate, when responding to a question about Trump's use of Twitter, he was actually sucking up to Pete Buttigieg, concurring with campaign remarks Buttigieg made about Trump on Twitter. Early in the debate, Booker tried to zing Elizabeth Warren on her Medicare for All plan as being too cumbersome, but didn't really hit the mark. Booker had one great moment in the fifth debate when he zinged Joe Biden for the second time during the campaign about remarks Biden made about Trump's wall to Mexico, implying that Biden was high when he made the remarks and reminding people that Biden was for decriminalizing marijuana use. Booker's zing got a great laugh and made Biden look foolish for the umpteenth time. Booker has repeatedly tried to project himself as a unifier of the party and the nation, like Barack Obama did. But Cory Booker is not Barack Obama, despite his good intentions. Andrew Yang did nothing to advance his campaign. When answering questions about dealing with special interests, he sucked up to Tom Steyer, rebounded slightly when he advocated paid family leave, and was weak on the foreign policy questions. Yang still had two good moments during the debate. When he was asked how he would deal with Vladimir Putin, his answer that he would tell Putin, quote, "Sorry, I beat your guy," unquote, was a rare moment of fun and laughter during the debate. His other great moment was when he declared that white supremacist terrorism should be seen as domestic terrorism and prosecuted as such, which drew vigorous applause from the Atlanta crowd, as well as myself. I had to give Yang an A for effort for those responses, but he remains a fringe candidate using the typical gimmicks all fringe candidates use dating back for centuries. Kamala Harris looked tired and harried and her performance last week was uneven. She handled the Trump impeachment question decently, hit Tulsi Gabbard effectively for her ties with Steve Bannon, and hit Donald Trump even harder when she told Trump that, quote, Donald Trump got punked, unquote. But Harris blew two great opportunities for herself when her answer on 6 months paid family leave rambled way too long, and was even weaker when she tried to hit Pete Buttigieg on his record dealing with race relations. Her greatest moment in the campaign is when she zinged Joe Biden badly in the first debate about busing and racism, but that moment has now faded in the memory. She has failed repeatedly to build on that triumph and has instead fallen in the polls. Harris still conveys an image of being a bit too glib and a bit too flippant in her persona, and that persona sometimes does not wear well with viewers. She does not show the same slickness that Bernie Sanders or Pete Buttigieg possess. Tom Steyer is on the debate stage simply because he is a billionaire with a gimmick. He did nothing to enhance his campaign during the fifth debate. He exuded corporate boredom when condemning special interests and advocated the building of sustainable housing units. His most notable moment was when he jabbed Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren about their not prioritizing climate change. This drew a testy comeback from Biden about Steyer making millions from coal mining investments. However, Steyer did rebuke Biden nicely. Sadly for Steyer, he represents the new breed of American politician, the bored billionaire who wants to buy the presidency, much like the Roman Caesars did during the final centuries of the Roman Empire, when in order to become emperor, one had to be ridiculously rich in order to buy armies and bribe the Praetorian Guard in order to become emperor. Sadly, America, too, like the Roman Empire, has entered this phase where to be a viable candidate, one needs millions just to be on a ballot. In the past, billionaires merely bought politicians, and they still do, to act on their behalf. But in today's America, the billionaires no longer go through the pretense of governing behind the curtains in the halls of power. Now they have overtly taken over and are making this country safe for corporate fascism, corporate racism, corporate sexism, and corporate homophobia. And that is how a great nation declines and falls. Joe Biden is like an old building that is slowly crumbling. Debate after debate, he continues to show his age, his lack of composure, his vulnerability to attack, and his failure to cover for his weaknesses. At no time has he shown any presidential smoothness or composure. Every answer is a struggle, and he opens himself up for attack at every turn. In 5 debates, he has gotten badly hit and has failed to plot any effective defense to counter these attacks. He tried to jab Sanders and Warren early in the debate about dealing with the GOP, but it was ineffective. His response to how to deal with Trump's wall was very weak. He had only one strong moment when he advocated punishing Saudi leaders and condemning China for its brutal policies. But what illustrates Biden's weakness to me came when Biden showed appalling weakness on dealing with Trump's Twitter attacks. Whereas Bernie Sanders showed great strength in answering the question, Biden was actually rambling, evasive, and tried to have it both ways with his response. I was pretty disgusted with Biden on that question. With every debate, Biden proves that he will not get the Democratic domination, and if he does, then the Democrats will lose the popular vote and the electoral vote in 2020. In the 4th debate, Elizabeth Warren was heavily bombarded by the other candidates, but in last week's debate, not as much because Pete Buttigieg is gaining in the polls, and he attracted more attacks than she did. She touted her programs, but never really distinguished herself or was able to pull away from the others. Early in the debate, she had a strong moment to prove herself as a fighter when she proposed her wealth tax, but weakened the argument when she rambled way too much. Her greatest moment came at the end when she was asked about Roe versus Wade. Her response about defending and expanding the economic rights as well as the reproductive rights of women was very powerful and effective. She also hit Trump effectively on the wall issue, reminding voters that the Donald's cutting back on aid to Central America is what caused the migrant crisis at the border in the first place. Elizabeth Warren is long on answers and programs, but she still remains short on that quote-unquote it factor needed to win a presidential election. Personally speaking, I don't feel that spark from her like I got when listening to Bill Clinton in 1992 or Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, or even Bernie Sanders in 2015 and 2016. Senator Amy Klobuchar will not win the nomination, ladies and gentlemen. However, she remains an interesting presence on the debate stage. She's not spectacular when performing, but she is steady and solid. She did well when handling the question of impeachment, though she inserted a naked appeal to Iowa voters in the process. She did well in decrying the special interest stranglehold on the electoral process. She had a wonderful moment in talking about how female candidates are held to a much higher standard than male candidates, which is quite true. She did much better than Kamala Harris did in touting a 3-month paid family leave program. She offered a thoughtful response when asked about dealing with the Saudi government. Her greatest moment came when she advocated that Roe v. Wade be codified into federal law, which got great applause from the debate crowd. She had one faltering moment when she tried to hit Pete Buttigieg on the voter access question, and she failed to connect when she tried. Still, when it comes to showing her folksiness to the crowd, I feel that Klobuchar does a better job of it than Elizabeth Warren does. Elizabeth Warren has a tendency of being overtly all things to all people and makes one wonder just who exactly is Elizabeth Warren. Klobuchar does the same thing, but she handles it better. She is able to convey her individuality and her persona much better. It's obvious to my mind that Klobuchar is trying to earn a niche in the beefsteaks. Earlier in the debate, she tried to cozy up to Pete Buttigieg. In the fourth debate, she tried to cozy up with Bernie Sanders. One cannot discount the possibility of Klobuchar being the beat candidate. Bernie Sanders has recovered well from his heart surgery and showed great strength in the fifth debate. Actually, Sanders has done a superb job of eradicating the age issue than Biden has. Sanders has not lost any strength. He started off strongly by reminding voters that there are greater issues than Donald Trump. He hit hard when it came to taking on GOP intransigence. He hit hard when advocating that Trump be prosecuted for his crimes. And when Joe Biden tried to zing Bernie on that issue, Sanders turned the tables on Biden effectively. Bernie was strong on dealing with the climate change issue and hit the Saudi government hard on their brutality. Sanders had one weak moment when asked about Afghanistan and whether he would bring the troops home and whether he would deal with the Taliban to do so. Sanders was evasive and circuitous on the question, and that was the only demerit on his performance. If there was a winner in the fifth Democratic debate, it was Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who was steadily gaining strength in the polls. Buttigieg showed presidential qualities in his performance. His opening remarks on the impeachment issue were thoughtful and even tender. He jabbed Elizabeth Warren subtly on her Medicare for All plan while touting his own program effectively. When asked about his qualifications, he deftly conveyed his outsider status as an asset and showed JFK-like humor when he said, "I don't even golf," unquote. There was an interesting moment when Buttigieg was appealing to Iowa voters with a compassionate response that drew a surprise rebuke from moderator Rachel Maddow, to which I wondered, what was Rachel Maddow's problem? I found that a bit strange and a bit surprising. Buttigieg showed intelligence and wisdom when discussing military budgets. Interesting, when Kamala Harris tried to hit him on race relations, Buttigieg did not hit back at Harris and thus risk alienating African American voters. Instead, he took the high road and portrayed himself as a unifier and healer, and quite effectively too, I might add. When Amy Klobuchar tried to hit him on the voter access issue, Buttigieg seamlessly made a good point that Washington's experience wasn't the only experience needed to win. And when Tulsi Gabbard threw her bogus 2 cents in, Buttigieg made Gabbard look like the Trump puppet that she is. Pete Buttigieg is regaining the good form he showed in the first debate. He has rebounded from his weaker performances in debates 2 and 3. He has built upon the progress he made in debate 4, and he is gaining momentum. The question remained, can he build on that momentum and reach a crescendo on polling day in Iowa on February 3rd? And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my analysis of the 5th Democratic debate. Stay tuned for next week's show, where I will be reading my chapter on the late Darrell Royal from my newly released book, Lords of the Gridiron, College Football's Greatest Coaches, on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the 1969 Game of the Century, which took place on December 6, 1969, when the Texas Longhorns defeated the Arkansas Razorbacks to win the 1969 College Football National Championship. Thank you, and good night.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.